So I've been asked about how I automate my night with Nina as far as my sequence goes. So I thought I would step through it here. Very first thing is I have a default sequence file, and that gets loaded whenever Nina starts up. Before anything else happens, this part of the sequence gets loaded into the advanced sequencer. And if you go into options and then the imaging, and then over on the right, you'll see sequence. There's a sequence template folder where your templates are stored, and then there's a startup sequence template. And that is a template JSON file that you've created. So if you go into the sequencer, there's three different sections. There's this top section up here, there's a middle section for like the target area, and then there's this bottom section. So what I did is I filled out this, what I call the startup sequence in the top part and the end sequence in the bottom part, and I saved that as a template. And that is my default template that gets loaded. So if I were to close out Nina right now and load it back up, it would come back up with this exact template here. And I'll step through it here. My global trigger is a failures to push over. That's what I use to notify things going on with my rig, things going wrong typically. So first step is to wait for time. I always want to wait for the sequence for astronomical dusk. Set switch value, so I have a Wanderer Box Plus that has switchable DC ports. So I make sure that these are getting turned on. Those are controlling mainly the dew straps that I have on there on the rig for the camera, um, for the telescope, and before I had a 2600 that had a camera dew ring also. So that's all getting turned on. It's connecting all equipment. Cameras getting connected, just in case something didn't get turned on before I started. That's getting connected, and then it's cooling the camera down, and it's actually waiting for the camera here. It'll pause and wait for the camera to cool down to the set temperature to make sure that it's at the right target temperature. Turns the dew heater on the camera because it's a 2600, unparks the scope, starts robocopy, and then I have a plug-in called Night Summary. It starts that night summary, and then I also run Home Assistant, which controls a lot of home automation type stuff in my house. There's a plug-in for that, so it turns off a light bulb that I have outside that's near the telescope so that that light is not interfering. So that's the startup sequence. After the startup sequence, it goes into the target area. So the end sequence at the end of the night is basically the kind of the reverse of all of that. I don't have a standard park. My park position is facing towards the northern celestial pole, and I don't like parking it that way. I've had some incidences with birds uh, perching on my scope and then pooping in it before. Thankfully, none of the optics got messed up, but it still caused issues that I had to clean out. So I actually point the scope at azimuth 270 and altitude -20. So that points it to the west and then slightly downward so that the optics are facing away from the rising sun in the morning. And also, birds can't perch on that end of the telescope and cause problems. If they do perch, it's on the camera end, and that's a little bit easier to clean up. So after it slews to that position, it stops tracking so that it stays in that position. Stops the robocopy, sends a pushover that says the sequence is done for the night, turns the dew heater off, stops the cooling on the camera, warms it up, and turns these switches off, and then ends the night summary. That's a page that kind of gives an overall summary of the night, how everything went, image statistics, things like that. So again, this is the default sequence. This is what gets loaded. So what about the target template that goes here in the center? So that comes from the framing wizard. And what I'll do is once I've set my rig up and powered it, balanced it, polar aligned it, and it's ready to go, I'll come back inside, get on my computer, and then I'll go into the Sky Atlas and the Framing Wizard. So, say we go to the Sky Atlas and we want to target M31 tonight. So, I'll punch in M31, come over here to set for Framing Assistant. That pushes it to framing. That's good enough framing, in my opinion. So, I have a DSO template that is already set up, and it has all of the imaging instructions, all the autofocus triggers, guiding triggers, everything is already set up in this DSO template. But as far as the actual target, it's blank. When I hit add to target sequence down here, it is going to push this specific target into the DSO template. So I don't have to create individual ones for each target. It just automatically pre-fills the coordinates into the DSO template container. So I'll click add to target sequence, and then the one that I use here is called 294 MC 2-minute subs. That's what it used to be called with my old camera. I just reused the same thing and changed the values in it, but you'll see the kind of overall idea. So you see here in the center, it popped up with the DSO container. I'll collapse it. It's sandwiched here between the startup sequence and the end sequence. And it says target M31, shows the RA and deck coordinates. And then we come down here to the exposure info. And again, it waits for time. This is just to make sure that it is actually astronomical dusk. It waits for the horizon. I do have a custom horizon set, so it's offset by 5 degrees to make sure there's no trees in the way. Sends a pushover that says I'm about to image, does a slew and center to these coordinates up here, and once it syncs, it runs an autofocus. Should have already been focused because I was running polar alignment, etc., but runs another autofocus just to be sure. Starts guiding, and then it'll come down here and start doing smart exposures. So it'll loop through these. I've got a dither every 3 subs. Normally I'll change this 120 seconds up to 300 seconds to take 5-minute subs. Again, this is just an old template that I reuse. I haven't updated it. I go in and manually punch in what I need. So it's also got all the triggers that I need throughout the night pre-programmed in here as well. So there's an AF after time, which is an autofocus every so often, which I have it for once an hour. AF after HFR increase. So if the star size, the half flux radius, starts drifting throughout the night because of temperature or whatever other factor, if that goes above 5%, then it'll automatically do another autofocus to adjust the focus point. There's a reconnect equipment in here for my focuser. Sometimes my focuser, which is a ToupTech AAF, has a problem where it'll drop to 0 position. It won't actually move, but it'll report that it's at 0 position. That's to fix that bug that's in it. Reconnect on camera download failure. If for whatever reason the camera fails to download a sub, it indicates that it's bugged out, so it will do a disconnect and a reconnect. Center after drift, that means that if the telescope is kind of drifting off of target and it gets too far away, it'll run another slew and sync to make sure that it is centered on the target. And there is also restore guiding. So if something in the process stops the guiding, it will automatically restore it. I've also got a DIY meridian flip trigger. I have found that the built-in meridian flip doesn't always work the best. I've encountered some problems with it in the past, so I have a DIY meridian flip. And if you expand this out, you can kind of do whatever you want inside of this container. So you can add extra instructions. So you see I've got a send to pushover, which will send a push to my phone that says the meridian flip has started, so I can get an idea of when that actually happened throughout the night. It'll stop the guiding because we don't need to guide during meridian flip. It'll wait to pass the meridian flip the scope, wait a little bit, do a slew and center to make sure it's still on target, wait a little bit again, run another autofocus just to check, start the guiding, and then send another pushover to say, hey, the meridian flip is finished, and then it'll drop back down here and start doing smart exposures again. Finally, I've got a couple more triggers in here that says, again, if the focus position is 0, disconnect and reconnect to fix that bug. And then also, if the weather shows that temperature is 0, pressure is 0, that means that the little weather service that I have connected has bugged out. Disconnect it and reconnect it. So that is my overall sequence that I have. Again, I'll scroll down here from the top, startup sequence, down through the target container, and then finally through the end sequence. And I could save this as its own template file, but it's easy enough to just go into the Sky Atlas and the framing assistant and push that DSO container because the startup sequence and the end sequence is already there. So that's an overview of how I do everything through the night, how my whole rig is automated, and feel free to ask any questions.